Don't mind the smoke, it's all good. Welcome back to a new thing we're doing, the Supernatural series. Dive into the whole supernatural world with me as we go exploring through the realms and worlds of witches, werewolves, vampires, everything and anything you can imagine. Come join me as we go into the supernatural files. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Supernatural Files. And today we are starting off with a very fun episode. We are going to be talking about witches, and not only witches, but the history of it. And it goes way back, even before we can even think of, even before America was America, we had witches. Keep that in mind. But most of us think of witches as having elemental power such as fire, lightning, and earth. But witches are more than that. They have been more than that for centuries. And let's dive in. Let's change sceneries right now. And yeah, this is a more fitting background because witchcraft is not just a practice that people don't know, but it is fundamental. Witchcraft is basically the practice of witches practicing magic, basically. Abilities such as using spells, incantations, magical rituals, and some of them have been good witches, and some of them not so good witches. And we're going to focus on the good part of it because no one wants a bad witch. No one does. Witchcraft is a broad term that varies culturally and specific, and thus can be difficult to find with precision. Historically remains the meaning that the most traditional cultures worldwide, notably the indigenous cultures of Africa and Africa countries like Asia, Latin America, and indigenous nations, well, if I can talk today, in America. We talk about the United States being a cultural pod, and that's basically what it was like when people were coming to the New World, that they phrased it. They brought all these cultures from Africa, from your Native Americans, and your Latin Americas. They all came to form a melting pot, and that is what basically it brought the practices and religions to here to practice. Historians of European witchcraft have been found the anthropological definition difficult to apply to European witchcraft, where witches could equally use or be accused of using physical techniques, as well as some who have really had attempted to cause harm by thought alone. And just think about just thought alone, that's kind of scary if you think about it. European witchcraft is seen by historians and anthropologists as an ideology for explaining misfortune. However, this ideology has manifested in diverse ways, as we will talk about later. Belief in witchcraft is often present within societies and groups where cultural frameworks includes a magical worldview. In the modern era, some may use witchcraft to refer to a being positive or neutral. Metaphysical practices such as divinations, meditation, or self-help techniques found in the modern pagan and new age movements. So out in the open, like they have in the past, like in paganism. When you think of Wicca, you think of naturally witchcraft, but it's not just witchcraft. Wicca is basically you're using all the elements, and that's what the bottom of witchcraft is you're gathering energy from all the elements. From you have earth, water, air, fire, light, and darkness. You're using all that energy to make the spell. The concept of witchcraft is that the belief in existence have persisted throughout record history. They have been present or central at various times and many diverse forms among cultures and religions worldwide, including both primary and highly advanced cultures, and continues to have an important role in many cultures nowadays. Historically, the predominant concept of witchcraft in the Western world derives from the Old Testament of the Bible, and it has laws against witchcraft, and entered in the mainstream when belief in a witchcraft gained church approval in modern early period. In the conflict between good and evil, where witchcraft was generally looked at evil and often associated with the devil, because they thought that if you had some powers, you made a compact with the devil himself. But that is not the thing. Witchcraft really has nothing to do with the devil. But these people back then, they thought that the church was almighty, and that if you spoke against the church, you were a heathen. This culminated in death, torture, and scapegoating, casting blame for misfortune, and many years of large-scale witch trials and witch hunt, especially in Protestant Europe, mainly England, because that's where it mainly started, because people were scared of what they couldn't understand. So they thought if they couldn't understand it, then that was witchcraft itself. Most notable practice in the Wiccan and modern witchcraft traditions, and is no longer practiced in secrecy, and think that paganism was so wrong, that paganism actually taught you to be a cannibalism, to sacrifice bodies to these gods that you didn't even know existed. You thought they existed, but you had no proof that they existed. Christian view is far from the only social perspective about witchcraft. Many cultures worldwide continue to have widespread practices and cultural beliefs that are loosely translated into English as witchcraft. Although the English translation masks a very great diversity in their forms, magical beliefs, practices, and the place in their societies during the age of colonialism. Many cultures across the globe are exposed to the modern Western worlds via colonialism, using accompanied and often preceded by intensive Christian missionary activity. In these cultures, beliefs that were related to witchcraft and magic were influenced by the prevailing Western contexts of the time. Witch hunts, scapegoatings, and shunning of suspects, witches still occur in modern eras. Now let's get into the raw history of the witchcraft. Although most indigenous people throughout history have had some beliefs about spirits, and people believed to have power through herbs or spirits, these were not called witches until contact with Western ideas. Neither did they always have negative connotations. Early witches were people who practiced witchcraft, using magical spells and calling upon spirits for help to bring about change. Most witches were thought to be pagans doing the devil's work. Many, however, were simply natural healers, so-called wise women or wise men whose choice of profession was misunderstood. It's unclear exactly when witches came to the historic scene, but the earliest records on record a witch in the Bible, in the book of Solomon 1, that to be written between 931 BC and 721 BC. So this was actually before the birth of Christ. So have that in your head. If you think being a witch is a newly thing, it's not. It dates way back even before Christ himself. Tell the story of the King Saul sought the witch of Endor to summon the dead prophet Samuel's spirit to help him defeat the Palestine army. In Europe, the pandemic over witchcraft was supported by Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1487 by Heinrich Kramer, a German Catholic clergyman. It taught the prosecutions of witches and was greatly promoted by the new technology of the printing press. It saw 29 printings before 1669. And that was a lot back then, just keep that in mind. Second only to the Bible. So the Bible was first and Maleficarum was second. The book says that the three elements are necessary for witchcraft. These were the evil intentions of the witch, the help of the devil, and the permission of God. Nearly all male and victims were overwhelming female. The witch hunts are considered to be mainly to be a genocide. In the documentary The Burning Times, Thea Jensen calls the period in the history of a woman's Holocaust. Witch hysteria really took hold in Europe during the mid-1400s, mainly when you had the monarchs in power. The monarchs said what you ate, you drink, what you did, and how you celebrated. When many accused witches confessed, often under torture, to a variety of wicked behaviors, with a century witch hunts were common, and most of the accused were executed by burning at the stake or hanging. Single women, widows, and other women on the margins of society were especially targeted. And not only that, you didn't just have hangings, you didn't just have burnings at the stake. People would tie rocks to your feet and put you in the ocean and make you drown, because they know that if you were at the bottom of the ocean, you could not come up. And it was later found out that hanging really didn't subdue a witch. They could come back, so that's why they got to the burning of the stakes. Between the years 1500 and 1660, up to 80,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe, just Europe alone. Around 80% of them were women, thought to be in cahoots with the devil and filled with lust. Germany had the highest witchcraft execution rate, while Ireland had the lowest. And you have to think about it. If you think of witchcraft, you mainly think of the Celtics, and they're so in touch with their spiritual side that Halloween wasn't just a little tradition that you go to trick or treat, knock knock, hey, trick or treat. No, it was a day for them to reconnect with the lost ones that they lost, because the veil between life and death was at the thinnest it could be on October 31st, and they would be seen by spirits just coming around, and they would celebrate that instead of just saying, no, we don't want that. The publication of Maleficarum, written by two well-respected German Dominicans in 1486, likely spurred a witch mania to go viral. The book, usually translated as The Hammer of Witches, was essentially a guide on and how to identify witches, hunt, and interrogate witches. Maleficarum labeled witchcraft as heresy according to the Catholic Church, and quickly became the authority for Protestant and Catholics trying to flush out witches living among them. For more than 100 years, the book sold copies of any other book in Europe besides the Bible itself. As witch hysteria decreased in Europe, it grew in the New World, which was reeling from wars between the French and British, a smallpox epidemic, and an ongoing fear of attacks from neighboring Native American tribes. This tense atmosphere was ripe for finding scapegoats. Probably the best known, well-known witch trials took place in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. And this is what we're all here for, the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials began when 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams began suffering from fits and tantrums, bodily contusions, and uncontrolled screaming. It is believed that they were poisoned by a fungus that caused spasms and delusions. As more young women began to exhibit symptoms, mass hysteria ensued, and 3 women were accused of witchcraft. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. Well, one of them basically practiced magic, so you can't blame them for going after Tituba because the color of her skin was different and she came from Africa, so that gave them probable cause to single her out as a witch. The Salem witch trials, it really had nothing to do with witches. It was about these kids that were reacting to something that was like a fungus, but then the other kids started catching on, and they would react to people in the meeting halls certain ways to where the officials started to wonder and question whether those people were witches, and these kids just did it as a power hunger thing because the more people they accused, the more power and entitlement they felt, and it assured them that no matter what, they were the top of the town. And it came down to when the governor's wife was accused, that's when the officials started to question the girls, but it didn't come into effect until like maybe we should question the girls to see if this person really is a witch or is she not. Like, how can they assume? But just going by instruction that the church wrote, that is no way to put out if a person is a witch or not, and to put them on trial without any facts and figures in front of them that is tangible. That just puts a bad feeling in any person's mouth, let alone the town. And the town of Salem, Massachusetts still feels that to this day, just because of girls that were so power hungry that they could get away with everything, including murder, because at the end of the day, they did murder those people, and it wasn't even just causes. So during that time, black people were slaves, and Tituba was a house slave, so she really knew the kids, but if something went wrong, she was just a scapegoat. Confessed to being a witch and began accusing others of using black magic on June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first accused witch to be put to death during Salem witch trials when she was hanged at the Salem gallows. Unfortunately, around 150 people were accused and 18 were put to death. Women weren't the only victims of the Salem witch trials. No. 6 men were also convicted and executed. Massachusetts wasn't the first of the 13 colonies to obsess about witches, though. In Windsor, Connecticut in 1647, Else Young was the first person in America executed for witchcraft. Before Connecticut's final witch trial took place in 1697, 46 people were accused of witchcraft in the state and 11 were put to death for the crime. In Virginia, people were less frantic about witches. In fact, the Lower Norfolk County in 1655, a law that was passed making it a crime to falsely accuse someone of witchcraft. And we have that law today too. Like, it doesn't involve witchcraft, but you can't falsely accuse anyone of a major crime, so that's where the law comes from, right there. Are witches real? One of the famous witches in Virginia's history is Grace Sherwood, whose neighbors allege she killed their pigs and hexed their cotton. Other accusations followed, and Sherwood was brought to the trial in 1706. The court decided to use a controversial water test to determine her guilt of innocence. Sherwood's arms and legs were bound and she was thrown into a body of water. See, I told you they would throw witches in the water. It was thought if she sank, she was innocent. If she floated, she was guilty because they thought that the witchcraft would float the body up. An article about a witch trial in New Jersey was published in 1730 in the Pennsylvania Gazette. It brought to light the ridiculous of some witchcraft accusations. It wasn't long before witch mania died down that the whole new world and laws were passed to help protect people from being wrongly accused and convicted and sentenced. Book of Shadows. Modern day witches of the Western world still struggle to shake their historical stereotype. Most practice Wicca, an official religion in the United States of America and Canada. Wiccans avoid evil and the appearance of evil at all costs. Their motto is to harm none, and they strive to live a peaceful, tolerant, and balanced life in tune with nature and humanity. Many modern day witches still perform witchcraft, but there is seldom anything sinister about it. Their spells and incantations are often derived from the Book of Shadows, a 20th century collection of wisdom and witchcraft, and can be compared to the act of a prayer in other religions. A modern day witchcraft potion is more likely to be an herbal remedy for the flu instead of a hex to self-harmful another person. Today's witchcraft spells are usually used to stop someone from doing evil or harming themselves. Ironically, while it's probable some historical witches use more witchcraft for evil purposes, many have embraced it for a healing promotion against the immortality that they are accused of. But witches, whether actual or accused, still face persecution and death. Several men and women suspected of using witchcraft have been beaten and killed in the Papua New Guinea since 2010, including a young mother who was burned alive. Similar episodes of violence against popular accused of being witches have occurred in Africa, South America, the Middle East, and immigrant communities in Europe and the United States. So, is witchcraft out there? Yes, it's certainly out there, but it's not evil. When witchcraft becomes evil, it becomes about the person that is doing the spell casting. Witchcraft in itself is not evil. It has helped a lot of people because it's brought into the light that there are holistic and natural paths that you can reach to make your body to be its healthiest version. And that's what all witchcraft is. It's like borrowing energy from everything around you to make you the best person you can be. So, and we've had this episode of the Supernatural Files. Stay tuned for next week where we go into the deep dive of the Werewolf Nation. Until then, I'll see you guys on the next one.